So I recently did a solo backpacking trip on the Appalachian Trail here in Pennsylvania. And overall, the trip was awesome, but I definitely got humbled a few times. And I made a few mistakes that I'm absolutely going to change before my next trip in a couple weeks, including one mistake that literally had me hiking the wrong direction for an hour. And if you backpack, I know at least one of you watching this has done something like this before. So this video is not really everything went wrong. Nothing actually went catastrophically wrong. The weather was beautiful. I got to hike one of the coolest sections of the AT in Pennsylvania through Lehigh Gap. The views were incredible. And honestly, the whole experience made me even more excited to get back out there next time. But little mistakes outdoors stack up fast. And once you're 20 miles into the woods carrying everything on your back, those little mistakes start feeling a whole lot bigger. So I figure I'd do a little garage debrief on what I learned, what I'd change, and how I'm approaching my next backpacking trip differently. At the time, all of this felt like a good idea. All right, so the original plan for this trip was to hike from Bake Oven Knob to the New Jersey border, about 45 miles over 3 days. Solo trip. And honestly, on paper, this seemed very reasonable to me. Now, I should mention, I'd definitely been consuming a healthy amount of ultralight backpacking YouTube before this trip, and I got a little too confident in my optimization abilities. I decided to use my frameless Evolve Supply Co. Ranger backpack instead of my Durston Kakwa 55. And technically, my base weight was only around 15 pounds, which sounds impressive until you realize reality does not care about your spreadsheet. Because I also brought my Sony full frame camera, my tripod, and an extra battery. So suddenly my lightweight setup started feeling a lot less lightweight after mile 12. And the biggest issue with the frameless pack was honestly the shoulder load. The hip belt barely transferred any weight. By the end of the day, my traps and shoulders were absolutely smoked, like taking the pack off and making weird old man noises smoked. And the funny thing is, none of this ruined the trip. I still loved the trip, but definitely underestimated how quickly small discomforts compound over long mileage days. And speaking of mileage, this is where things started to escalate a little bit. So day one was around 16 miles. Felt pretty good. Day two ended up being 22 miles, which I think is probably the most I've ever hiked in a single day. And I did not exactly plan for that. Part of that was because of the wildfire situation that happened on the AT, which honestly was one of the coolest and weirdest parts of the trip. You spend so much time thinking about wildfires being an out west thing. Pacific Crest Trail, Colorado Trail, all that stuff. And meanwhile, here I am in my home state on the Appalachian Trail in Pennsylvania, rerouting around an active wildfire area. So that added extra mileage and complexity to the trip. But honestly, that part I was handling okay. The real issue came later. And this is where I had my "you've got to be kidding me" moment. At one point on day two, I came to a split in the trail and I noticed a blue blaze trail leading down to a water source. And I immediately had that weird feeling because I was like, wait a second. I had filled up water there earlier that day. And then I saw another sign, 10 miles to Wind Gap. And suddenly all the math in my brain started recalculating at once. And I realized I had been hiking the wrong direction for about an hour. At the time, this did not feel like a good idea. And honestly, my first reaction was just frustration, not panic. Just, you have got to be kidding me. And I remember standing there trying to mentally replay how this even happened while simultaneously realizing, okay, it's around 2 p.m. and I still want to get to Wind Gap tonight. And now I have 10 miles left to hike before dark. And for a brief moment, I genuinely wasn't sure if I could do it. Which sounds dramatic now, sitting comfortably in my garage. But when you're already exhausted, your shoulders are wrecked, you've already been hiking all day, and suddenly you realize you accidentally added extra miles, your brain starts spiraling a little bit. And honestly, I think this was the moment of the trip that humbled me the most, because I realized you can plan all you want, but outdoors stuff rarely goes according to plan. Sometimes you miss a turn, sometimes there's a wildfire, sometimes your gear setup isn't quite right. Sometimes your totally reasonable mileage plan turns into an accidental ultra marathon. And at a certain point, the only thing you can really do is put one foot in front of the other and keep moving, which is basically what I did. And somehow I made it to Wind Gap, absolutely exhausted. And I stayed at the Gateway Motel that night, which by the way, felt like a luxury resort after hiking 22 miles. Hot shower, bed, pizza, air conditioning. I would have given that motel 5 Michelin stars at that moment. And the next morning, I woke up and realized something important. I was cooked, like physically sore in a way where I knew if I tried to do another 15-mile day to the New Jersey border, I probably just wasn't going to enjoy myself anymore. So I called the trip there. And honestly, I think old me would have been annoyed by that. But now I actually think it was the right decision because the goal was never to prove something. The goal was to have an adventure. And I did, even if I didn't go perfectly. Now, another thing that definitely humbled me on this trip was power management. And this is where the creator side of backpacking starts getting complicated. Because I brought one 10,000 milliamp hour battery bank. This tiny little guy, and yeah, this should be plenty. At the time, it felt like a good idea. It was not. By the end of day 2, the battery bank was dead, my phone was dead, my Sony camera was dead, and then my SD card filled up. Which honestly may have annoyed me more than the battery issue, because there's still things I wanted to capture. And that's the weird balancing act with filming backpacking trips. The camera gear was worth bringing. I'm really happy I brought it. The footage from Lehigh Gap especially was incredible. But filming also changes the equation. You use more battery, you carry more weight, you stop more often, you think differently. And I think I underestimated that a little bit, especially as a solo hiker carrying all the gear myself. So for my next trip, we're making some adjustments. And honestly, I think they're good adjustments. First off, the frameless pack experiment is over for now. I'm going back to my Durston Kakwa 55, because apparently I've reached the age where I appreciate functional hip belts. I'm also upgrading from this, the 10,000 milliamp hour battery, to this guy, which is double the size. And so this is confidence, this is wisdom, and I'm bringing extra Sony batteries, extra SD cards, and maybe the biggest change, we're dialing back the mileage big time. My next trip is going to be out around World's End State Park and the Loyalsock Trail. 5 guys, 4 nights, camping, fishing, waterfalls, and instead of trying to hammer 16 to 22 mile days, we're doing more like 6 miles a day. And honestly, I'm really excited about that because I think one of the things this trip taught me is that backpacking doesn't always need to feel like a race or a performance. You don't always need to optimize every ounce. You don't need to max out mileage every day. You don't need to suffer to earn the experience. Sometimes it's okay to slow down a little. Drink bad instant coffee, even though you publicly advocated for bringing NaroPress in a previous video. Maybe have a little bourbon at the tent at night. Watch the sunset, go fishing, and just enjoy being outside. Now, don't get me wrong, I still love this trip. Honestly, I think the mistakes are part of what made it memorable. And if anything, the trip made me more excited about backpacking. Just hopefully with slightly better navigation decisions next time. So if you've ever missed a turn, overestimated your mileage, packed the wrong gear, brought too little battery, or gotten humbled outdoors in general, just know that you are very much not alone. I think imperfect trips are usually the ones that end up teaching you the most anyway. And honestly, adventure rarely goes according to plan. That's kind of the point. If you want to see the actual Appalachian Trail itself, including Lehigh Gap, the wildfire reroute, and all the scenery from this adventure, I'll link to that video here. And I'll also be filming the upcoming Loyalsock trip. So if you want to follow along as I continue slowly learning lessons the hard way out in the woods, make sure you subscribe. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you on the next adventure.